Welcome back to the G-Man Show. We're on the internet together, and we're looking at a couple of quick clips. If you want to see the originals without me ranting, raving, commenting, you can always find them in the video description as always. Let's jump in. And this is about rental prices, the upward pressure on rental prices, and also the higher percentage of people ending up homeless.
In almost every suburb across the country, Australians are feeling the pressure of a tight rental market. Riverwood, a working-class pocket of Sydney, 19 kilometres from the CBD, Arafat Manan and his growing family are being forced out of their second home in 12 months.
All right. This is for somebody who will call me racist in the comments. It's a blatant fact. We just have too many people coming into this country. That's it. That is it. I will say it until I am black and blue in the face, or blue in the face. Another thing, lots of these people who don't have much security, and I'm not saying it's their fault, they don't have a lot of security, housing security, and they keep pumping out kids, making their situation even harder.
I knew it.
I don't know.
It's a bit overwhelming, and we're expecting our second child, in October. And we just received our second notice for this property we're living in 2 weeks ago.
How long have you been in this property for?
Nearly 9 months, and we just received our eviction notice, as I mentioned.
He says the landlord has decided that a family member will take over the property. For the last 7 years, Arafat Manan rented just down the road, but was forced out in November.
All right. So that excuse, that can be used, and then the property can be put up for rent legally, right? For the 6 months now. However well that is policed, I don't know. I've never tried to be dodgy in that manner. You need to sign a statutory declaration and all that sort of stuff. But, however, it is a way for a landlord to get a family to move in, or even leave it vacant, so they can increase the base rent. So if you're in demand, growing and gentrifying suburb, like these people probably are, they don't have a lot of capacity to pay more money. You can get unscrupulous landlords, like scumbags, that will try and pull every cent, every dollar out of people. So they'll displace these people using that excuse and move somebody in and charge an extra $100, $200 a week. And the loss on the rent will claw itself back over a few months, and then they've set up a new baseline, right, for the bottom end of the rent that the market can expect to pay. Or, alternatively, they haven't been great tenants, and that's the only way you can get rid of people now.
The move, his rent had skyrocketed.
From $500 in 2 years, it went 650 straight away in one jump, and from 650 to 720.
The rent at his current home is also $720 per week. He says much more than half of his income is put to covering the costs of his housing.
If you just add the utility and other things, then
have a lot of money. It was never struggle street to this extreme, where just the cost of living will eat up an entire worker's wage. Absolute crime. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Electricity has gone up again. More taxes coming in. The government is brainstorming on how to raise their revenues by taxing in all sorts of different matters. So life's going to get harder.
Not far away, the suburb of Revesby has seen some of the biggest rental growth in Sydney in the last 12 months. Units alone have gone up more than 20%. G'day, Dan.
G'day, mate.
Dean Stoyanovsky has been managing properties in this area for decades.
She's a bit thick, Mike. That's right, it keeps going up.
He's showing us a property where the rent has jumped almost $200 a week in 2 years.
Dean, tell me about this place. It's a 5-bedroom home, 2 bath, 1 car. It's going for $700 a week.
Why is this sitting at $700 a week?
Oh, Mike, as you can see, it's in its original state. And given the prices that are going around the area for your place, the owner was a bit more reasonable in seeking $700 for this place.
$700 a week for a place. It probably could do with a really good clean, maybe a lick of paint that might come up a lot better, maybe a stove. Maybe spend 10, 15 grand on it, do a really mini renovation on it. It is not reasonable, $700 a week to live in a joint that is just about being knocked over. Well, it is a 5-bedroom home, and it has to my understanding, it had a bigger package of land, right? So the guy is basically renting it out based probably on the size of land. The dwelling is secondary. This is one of the things I do have. Like, I have been involved in property investing before. Anyone who has a home like this and is expecting to get top dollar, absolute slumlord. Absolute slumlord. They're the worst of the worst. They're the kind of people that give landlords a bad name. It's just like the tenants that kick holes in walls are the bad ones that give renters a bad name. But I think there are more and more of these. And once again, at the risk of being sound a racist, the most unscrupulous landlords that I've seen have been foreigners. I'm not saying we're from. They are absolutely ruthless when it comes to trying to get every little last cent out of that investment without improving it in any way. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Like this, how many people would be applying for it?
Oh, given this one, at most open homes, we get up to 10 groups. You know, we've had people that put applications through prior seeing the property, trying to get their foot in the door earlier.
It still shows that we are in a rental crisis. We're just moving away from the extreme had seen previously.
Dr. Nicola Powell is the Domain Group's Chief of Research and Economics.
We have record high rents across the vast majority of our major capital cities. But one of the key things that we've started to see is a slowdown in the pace of rental price growth. What that means is rents are rising in some areas, but particularly for house rents, they've actually plateaued over the most recent quarter across many of our capital cities.
Well, of course, because landlords need to recoup or get money for their rental property. I know they're seen as evil parasites or vampires by other people. The rates, insurances, council rates, interest rates, obviously pushing the interest rates. Everything's gone through the roof. Cost of maintenance. So all these things are being pushed up through inflation and the aftermath of that COVID money printing. What do you think's going to happen? Private landlords are not also St Vincent de Paul or the op shop. They need to someone be able to hold that asset. So people are getting squeezed in all ways. So you have all these things happening. Then landlords are passing on the cost, pushing up rent. The only thing that I believe will really slow it down, is number one, yes, we need to cut back immigration. I'll say in every single video I make that is related to Australia and the economy, we need to cut it back. But they won't do that because that's tax revenue that they won't get. They're importing tax revenue. And the interest rates to reduce. Now, a reasonable landlord who is not a scumbag, and they are out there, there are plenty of them out there who are happy, you have good tenants, you're looking after the place, and you don't have to worry and wake up and what's going to happen in the house next week, what bill's going to come in, what things are going to be broken, what argument am I going to have. Generally, they're not going to raise the rent very much, if not at all, if they're neutral in holding their property. It might be $10 a week or something, if that. A good tenant is worth their weight in gold. So the rates coming down, especially if they come down another 100 basis points, like they're saying, who knows what's going to happen? All the economists are wrong anyway. I can make a punt; it'll be just as right or wrong as the experts. But if those come down, there'll be less upward pressure on rents. But this is going to keep going up. Lack of supply, increased demand, supporting demand every single day, just like the couple that we saw, the first couple that were most likely recent immigrants who have been in the country for a few years. The new Australian, that's what it is. Hundreds of thousands of them coming in every single year, having a hard time just like us trying to get rentals or get into the property market. I've got nothing against immigrants, so I can understand why we want to come here. It's a good place to live, way better than where their home countries are and the opportunities for them. The government, though, the government's not going to do anything about it because it's money. I have an issue with the government doing this, not the actual people.
The country, the latest domain data has the median asking price for rentals sitting at $650 a week for both houses and units. The most expensive place for a rental remains in Sydney, where the median weekly rent for a house is $780 and $740 for a unit. Perth and Canberra are sitting second. Hobart is the cheapest.
We have seen multiple years where tenants were facing double-digit increases in asking rents. Nobody's wages has increased as much as what we have seen in asking rents over that 5-year period.
Right. In Sydney's southern suburbs at Mortdale, $709. What are prospective tenants telling you about the market conditions right now?
They're telling you it's very tough, very expensive.
What factor is supply playing in all of this?
Yeah, there's not enough supply.
We haven't had enough supply.
Oh, wow, guys, I could do this job. Yeah, there's not enough houses. Yeah, that's what it was. Think about this, all these people are screaming out for more regulations, controls on private landlords. The renters are going to end up paying for this. These very people that are screaming for it. Having 5-star quality places, every house has double glazed windows, and everything's perfect, all the electric's done every year, the gas is checked every year, this, that, the other, rental caps, they're trying to scream for that, trying to scream for getting the houses, 6-star rating, getting solar panels and batteries so the tenants don't have to pay higher electricity costs. Who pays that? The landlord. That's going to get passed through to tenants, pushing the market up. The government needs to stop fiddling with it.
meet population growth. We haven't seen enough investment activity across our different capital cities, and particularly during the peak of the pandemic, we saw a reduction in number of people per household. And when you see a reduction in household size, what that means is you need more homes to house the same amount of Australians.
The national vacancy rate, the percentage of properties in the private rental market which is sitting empty, remains very low. Nationally, it's sitting at 0.9% for the quarter. In Darwin, Hobart, Adelaide and Perth, it's even tighter. Sydney is at 1.1%. The highest vacancy rate is in Melbourne at 1.3%.
Melbourne's had a bit of a plateau in terms of rents increases and property appreciation. Victoria, gone to the dogs. Well, I don't know why you want to buy a property to invest in Victoria. Basically, all you are in Victoria as a property investor is somebody who donates money, time values of money through many different taxes to the government, to the SRO.
Just 4 kilometres from Melbourne CBD is the inner city suburb of Kensington, where rents for units have seen some of the highest jumps.
So this is typical of what you'll see in the Kensington market at the moment, so your 3-bedroom unit.
Okay, how much a week?
This is $630 per week. In terms of the Melbourne market, this is right on average. This is right on par with what you see up there.
Just across the river in Maribyrnong, these record high rents are most evident in 1-bedroom apartments. This one, with water glimpses, is up for lease for $450 a week.
Prior to COVID, this would have hovered around $300, $350. During COVID, it dropped right down to about $280. Now it's going to re-enter at that.
The current vacancy rate seen across the country has property analysts declaring it a landlord's market.
A landlord's market is when the vacancy rate sits below 2%. For a balanced rental market, we need that vacancy rate to be sitting between 2 and 3%.
This is a...
Yeah, well, houses. The vacancy rates are going to remain low. First up, obviously, is immigration. Stop it. Everyone's paying, apart from the government. The government gets money through the visa process and through other charges and all of that. Which these
receive AI link passengers. Now go to Sydney International Airport Station. Deliver passengers.
Needs to stop. Can't build enough houses. You got 600,000 people coming to the country. I don't know what the number is. It's something stupid like that. Every single year.
2-bedroom place.
What's our population? 27, 28 million. That is just going to go through the roof. It's not going to be able to keep up. Resources can't keep up in major cities. People say, "Oh, move regional and we move out to Coober Pedy." There's nothing there, unless they make something.
This one's a little bit unusual. It's on the market for $425 per week, largely because the owner's also got it up for sale.
Are we seeing a lot of these properties being put to market?
Yeah, unfortunately at the moment there are a lot of owners who are cashing out. The introduction of lots of taxes, standards, legislation means that it's costing owners more. It's harder for them to be able to hold on to those investments long term.
We have seen
100%, and most landlords are getting a shit when I sort of not even stick up, I just say facts about landlords. Most landlords are not genuine. It's not what's it doing, Harry and Chicken off Westfield, Vicinity Centres, Metricol, whatever the company is, that billionaire, they're sitting there on label. Average punter, been able to save up some capital and put that capital and leverage up debt, try and have property that maybe in 20, 30 years they can sell and add to their nesting or give it to their kids. And you got the government fiddling it, making it next to impossible to be able to financially justify holding it. Most property investors hold it at a loss. Now, I know you get someone here, blah, 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 blah. If you're on the red every single month, unless you're claiming big depreciation from a new build or something at the end of the year. In the red. Stupidest thing ever. All right, we do another quick one. We'll play this video out. This is about homelessness. Obviously, a very much interrelated topic. This video is called National Crisis as Homelessness Worsens Under the Albanese Government.
Rates, particularly for women and girls, have worsened during the Albanese government's first term in office. Homelessness Australia says data from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare shows the number of people accessing homelessness services each month has increased by 10% since May 2022. For women and girls, the increase was 14%. Homelessness Australia Chief Executive Kate Colvin joins us now to discuss this. Kate, can you tell us about this increase and where it's being felt most?
Look, we're seeing this increase across the country, and one of the starkest increases is for women and girls who are already.
I can ask why man is invisible in this picture. It should say homelessness worsens under the government across the board. There's higher chances of homelessness in all instances, not just women and girls. We're not talking about male homelessness, why a male is not worth putting on this. I know girls are going to be a lot more vulnerable, seem to be a lot more vulnerable, and more likely to be displaced because of probably DV type stuff or divorces and all that sort of thing. And I'm not going to get too controversial what I'm going to say.
Already homeless when they first came to a home service, and that has increased 20% over this period. And what that shows us is that women are not getting the help they need to avoid homelessness. They're not getting that timely intervention that might prevent a period of homelessness. So they're coming to homeless services already with nowhere to go. Friends and family network.
Have a look at what our country is. Tents in the park. Tents in the park. I'm all about this, not just for women and girls, for everybody. We're not talking about all the guys you see lying on the streets of Melbourne, middle of winter without a shirt on, lying on the concrete with his dog next to him or whatever. Let's get those people, let's get those guys off the street and up there. They're not talking about that. I think everyone needs to be included. I'm not saying women and girls isn't a valid thing, absolutely. They're more vulnerable. But, come on. Let's look after everybody here. I think everyone is struggling. I wholeheartedly agree. I would be happy if they diverted our tax money and they're blowing a whole bunch of other things like Commonwealth Games and failed contracts and with road constructors or the East-West thing or something like that, $1 billion. I would be more than happy if they cut all that stuff, wind it back, and your social problems, getting people off the street, even if it's into temporary accommodations that are built on big blocks of land out there that they rent off farmers or something, and they put little mini houses on them or something like that, so people can get back on their feet. That is a better use of money. I'd be all about that instead of blowing it on bullshit and what they call the AUKUS. The amount of money they spend on that and sending money over to the Ukraine, and I feel like a boomer in this one. It's just triggering me. I get sad to see Australia in this state. I really do. Homelessness is horrible. I've never been homeless, but I definitely can empathise with people who are homeless, how stressful, how hopeless you would feel, and how discarded by society you are, really, if you're ending up on the street. No safety net.
To find out now, just have nowhere.
And so, I mean, that's the immediate reason. If we broaden that out, what's feeding into that?
So the biggest issue that we face is that there's just not rentals that people can afford. So, the government has made some really welcome investments in social housing, but the reality is that the prices has grown over decades. And
the government has caused this issue of private lenders. They're the ones who raise the price due to these market pressures. The government has done it. The government's not going to help you. Look at already what's happened since Albo's got in. liberal shell on this guy. I'm not political in any way. I didn't have the clarity to look at all this stuff and information I see without getting involved into the meeting. This country is stuffed. Everyone went and voted for it. So you probably should going to get something off it. You're going to get a reduction in your tax fees. You're going to increase the salary. The benefit, whatever it is. You're going to build 1 billion houses. You're going to bring the cost of living down. All those things. The opposite has happened. They've missed the building target. They're not going to make it. The ambitious target that everyone knew they weren't going to make anyway. Electricity prices are going up. Supermarket, petrol, more taxes they're bringing in. They're sitting in Treasury scheming on how to do it. How do we get the most money? And they're investing on the wall. Speed cameras, about that. What's for your safety, guys? Yeah, okay. Let's go 2 kilometres over the limit, 4 kilometres over the limit, get fine. That's about your safety, isn't it?
And then after keep increasing the proportion of social housing as a proportion of all dwellings. So what we're calling on this parliament to do, this government to do, is to invest more in social housing so that we get 1 in 10 of all dwellings is a social housing property. And that would just mean that when someone goes looking for a rental, they can find a place they can afford and they're much less likely to become homeless in that circumstance.
So looking at this trend, is this likely to continue if there's not that response that you're calling for from the government?
Yes, unfortunately, we are seeing things getting worse, and that's having a really devastating impact on the front line of the housing crisis in homelessness services. So services already turn away 72,000 people each year. We know that another 46,000 people can't get through the door because services are so overwhelmed. They've sort of gone on bypass to respond to people who are already seeking help. So, another thing that we're really flagging with the government is the need to invest in homelessness services so that there's someone there to help you when you come looking for help. But the other important priority is to increase income support. I mean, it's not rocket science. If people don't have enough income, they can't afford to pay their rent, and that's a really major reason why people become homeless. And for women and girls, another major reason is domestic and family violence. So whilst we still have poverty and violence in the community, we will still have homelessness.
Do you have evidence that those call?
Yep, the government gets us to find the money from somewhere to pay for it, and they're not going to do that. I send money over to Ukraine and all that. We got people lying on the street with services that can't even help these people. There's a mantra around homeless people. They're all bums and violent people that have made horrible decisions, drug addicts and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, some of that is true, I guess. But more and more people hitting on the street now. They're just everyday people, can't keep their head above water, can't afford rent, maybe can't even find a place to get involved in the trap. Very hard to get out of that trap. You're homeless, might be jobless. They say, I'll just go get a job. Yeah, and you rock up to a job interview and say you live under a bridge, and you might not be able to present yourself in a way that someone would expect. They're not going to hire you, so it's a trap. It's very hard to get out of that. Not a lot of empathy. I've talked about this a number of times on this channel. Melbourne, I hate going to the Melbourne CBD. It's just depressing. A lot of mentally ill people, drug-affected people, due to the pressures of being homeless, lives destroyed, never coming back, walking around, screaming, yelling at the sky, yelling at each other, fighting, around. You're pissing all over the shops there, pissing all over the street. Joint's an absolute basket case. Absolutely gone to the dogs ever since COVID. It was even bad before then, but ever since COVID, ever since all these lockdowns and whatever happened, especially with the property, the rental prices, the cost of utilities, just the cost of living. It isn't just the rent, it's everything combined that puts people out. Can't afford to live. And I hate to be a doomer on this channel because I'm generally a positive and positive, optimistic outlook kind of person. But I think in the short term, it's the next 2-3 years, it's going to be great. It's not going to be great.
Also will be answered.
Look, certainly we've got a good line of communication open with the government. Really opens our is to make homelessness a top priority. So, we do know that they're considering these issues, but there's a lot of priorities that government are dealing with, and we need homelessness to be top of the agenda because this is a national crisis and it needs urgent national action.
Well, once I agree with them on that particular point, something needs to be done here. Nothing can be done. Can't be kicked in the road. We keep sending money to foreign countries, hundreds of millions of dollars that could be used to uplift these services or create some sort of even compounds. I know it sounds like a bad word. I think about it, they're going to keep folks in spend a bit of money to make it cheating at that. Street. I'm talking about the trap. As somebody who's never been on the street, anyone who's been homeless, tell me how did you get off the street? Or are you still on the street? I want to know what it's like on the ground. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you watching my videos through again. Once again, appreciate you. That channel, so I appreciate it. You got to subscribe and be a part of it. Thank you.
Linux market share is a hotly discussed topic. From August 2024, Linux market share approaching 4.5% for the first time could hit 5% by Q1 2025. Steam on Linux ends 2024 with a nice boost to its market share. Sometimes, though, it's not all good. Here's from 5 years ago. Linux market share for September 2022 is, shall we talk about something else? It is growing steady. This is from 4 months ago, 3.99%. And recently, you've probably seen a lot of these articles. According to one source, Linux hits over 6. Linux has over 6% death share. Yes, you read that right. Here's how. We made Linux great again. Linux desktop usage hits record highs. Recent articles about 6% are pulling from analytics.usa.gov, a government website tracking various bits of data. If we go down to this bit right here, set it to the past 30 days, there you go, 6.2% on Linux. Where does this data come from, though? If we go to the About section, right here under About this site, this website provides a window into how people are interacting with the government online. The data comes from a unified Google Analytics account for US federal government agencies known as the Digital Analytics Program. So basically, it's keeping an eye on what people are visiting government websites with, what operating system they're on, what browser they're on, what states they're in, things like that. It's not worldwide numbers. Yes, people from outside the US might visit these sites, but the majority of people are going to be in the United States of America. However, when we talk about Linux user market share, there are generally 2 sites being referenced. Sometimes there's other things, but these are the main ones. Firstly is StatCounter. Secondly is the Steam hardware survey. Now, you might not recognize the name StatCounter, but you will recognize this graph, the desktop operating system market share worldwide. This is what a lot of people often reference when talking about the market share. Now, none of these sources are inherently bad, and you should never look at them. Whether that be StatCounter, the Steam hardware survey, analytics.usa.gov, all of these things have a value. This isn't something like MMOpopulation.com, which includes games which are not MMOs. And people actually still reference this site. I don't know why anybody takes it seriously. Not like that. These are real data points, but you need to look at them in the context of what the data is representing and the limitations of that data. The problem is oftentimes people talk about these numbers as the actual market share of Linux. This is how many people are using Linux. 4.1% of people are on Linux. 6% of people are on Linux. What does the Steam Hardware Survey say right now? It is 2.57% of people are on Linux. All of these are obviously different numbers, which should initially tell you that all of these are tracking different things. And I understand why people get excited about these numbers, and there is still a reason to get excited about them, but not necessarily about the raw number itself, but where that number is going. And when you talk about these data points, you need to keep in mind what the data is actually representing. Here is the FAQ on stat counter. Point number 1. What methodology is used to calculate stat counter global stats? This is the most important thing. Stat counter is a web analytics service. Our tracking code is installed on more than 1.5 million sites globally. These sites cover various activities and geographic locations. Every month, we record billions of page views to these sites. Each page view, we analyze the browser, operating system, screen resolution used, and we establish if the page view is from a mobile device. We provide independent, unbiased stats on internet usage trends. We do not relate our stats with any other information sources. No artificial weightings are used. We remove bot activity and make a small adjustment to our browser stats for pre-rendering in Google Chrome. Aside from those adjustments, we publish the data as we record it. In other words, we calculate our global stats on the basis of more than 5 billion page views per month by people from all over the world onto our 1.5 million member sites. By collating our data in this way, we track the activity of third-party visitors to our member websites. We do not calculate our stats based on the activity of our member sites alone. This helps to minimize bias in the data and achieve a random sum. TLDR collects all of this information from all of these different sites it's actually installed on, and then remove bot activity, counts up everyone who's visiting the site, and then you get your stats, and you get graphs that look something like this. Now, firstly and most notably, it is quite common on Linux to spoof what browser you are using. Now, is that going to be a massive percentage of people? It's kind of unclear, but it is something that is definitely actively discussed, and a lot of browsers do this out of the box in the way that we package on Linux. Usually not in some weird random group that doesn't make any sense, but hiding in plain sight. Spoofing yourself as Chrome on Windows because most people are Chrome on Windows. Secondly, some of the oddities in the data. Most notably is OS X and macOS. These are both correct names for Apple operating systems. The thing is that the rebrand to macOS happened about 9 years ago. So I have doubts that 9.91% of Apple users are on a really old version of an Apple computer. That just doesn't really align with, especially the majority, right? Like if these numbers would flip, I could see. But this doesn't make any sense for the older one to be the larger group. Now, I don't think these numbers are made up. I just don't understand why they are two separate numbers and not merged together into one when you don't have, Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows 11, all the separate things. Why is Apple's system, which you know is the same operating system, two separate entries? Then you have this weird unknown segment. I don't think this is, 9% BSD users or 9% people with mangled user agents. I don't understand what this is and why this is over double the Linux market share. This right here is a very strange data. None of this is to say the data is useless and should never be looked at. Again, it's not MMO population where the numbers appear to be made up. I don't even know what it's supposed to be. But it mustn't be context on what the numbers are. Here's data month to month. So you're saying, okay, so in January it's X number, in February it's Y number, in March it's Z number. And you look at those numbers and you see, okay, that number is trending in a direction. We go year on year on year. You see the numbers are trending in a direction, whether that be up or down. That has value, because what you're looking at there isn't necessarily the specific number itself. You don't really care that it's 4.1%, 5%, or 37%, whatever the number is. But you're looking at the direction the number is heading. Number go up, number go down. That tells you something about. But specifically 4.1%, this doesn't actually mean anything without knowing what the rest of the data is and understanding why there are these oddities. And if you're comparing this number against other sources, like the Steam Hardware Survey, like the USA numbers, this can't really be done because all of those are tracking different things. Now, since I mentioned a few times, let's talk Steam Hardware Survey. I love this site. Everybody loves this site. If you randomly get picked to do the Steam Hardware Survey, most people do it because it's something cool to do. And that's the thing with the data. I have not been able to find a explanation for their methodology. It appears like every month a random amount, maybe not random, some subset of the Steam user base is randomly sent surveys. How many? Who gets them? I know there's a lot of people who've been on Steam for many years who've never seen them. None of this, from what I can tell, is publicly documented. But what we can say is this is a sampling of the Steam user base. And what is the Steam user base? The Steam user base, majority, yes, there are applications like Critter, other things like that, but the majority of people on Steam are gamers. I think that's a pretty uncontroversial thing to say. Now, with what we can see of the system, it does obviously have some problems. Firstly, dual roots aren't counted because you'll get a survey once for your account. So whichever system you're on when you have to see the survey is the system that is going to be counted. So if you're someone who does have both, if you are someone who has a Steam Deck and a Windows system, for example, only one of those systems is going to be counted. Now, how much does that influence data? It's hard to say, but it is going to influence it somewhat. Also, due to the size of the data set, it is prone to wild shifts. Yes, there is a lot of Steam users, but they're all here for a specific purpose. And earlier this year, February 2025, Steam Hardware Survey, Linux dropped 0.61% to 1.45%. Windows 10 went up by 10.47%. So, what's most likely to happen here is Chinese internet cafes and updating systems. And Chinese internet cafes, there was also like a big spike in the Chinese usage on Steam. They have been prone to just randomly change the metrics with millions of systems just suddenly changing. After that month, things settled back into what they were before. But you have to keep things like that in mind, especially just looking at a single data. I think the biggest takeaway from everything I'm saying here is individual data points are neat and they are fun to talk about, but are ultimately useless. Seeing what it looks like in just a single month, if you took, say, this one, it would look really, really bad. But if you take the past year of data, the past 3 years of data, that tells a very, very different story. So here we have on Bit Analytics the Steam track. This Steam track of the Steam Hardware Survey over the months. And look at that. Going back to 2018 to June of 2025, it is clearly trending in a direction. It is trending upwards, not at the fastest rate possible, but it is trending in that direction. Linux usage is going. And I know, big number, big excitement, I get it, right? Like, I totally get it. But keep things grounded. Focus on the mission. Focus on things getting more popular, things getting bigger, not necessarily these arbitrary, not entirely accurate milestones. But what do you think? Do you care about these big milestones? Do you even care that Linux is trending upwards? Do you want Linux to be more popular? I'd love to know. So if you like video, go subscribe, all the fun stuff. If you really like video, and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Verify link in the description. No, that's going to be it for me, and Linux, big number, big happy.
Laws are only as useful and as powerful as society's will to enforce them. And there's no place more obvious than when it comes to consumer protection legislation, especially laws that enshrine the right of ownership. Few and far between, and unfortunately, they are not very well enforced. I did a video on this new law that came out in the state of California that I'm actually for. It says that if you're advertising something as a sale of a good, and you use the word purchase, buy, or any term which a reasonable person would use to understand a unrestricted ownership interest in the digital good, but you have the ability to revoke it from the customer, you can't use the word lifetime because that's false advertising. I wanted to try and test this case with something that was very obvious. Here you can buy a textbook and they clearly delineate between a year and lifetime. However, when you click onto this really, really tiny text over here that says details, next this is a digital license, you see that it only means up typically 5 years of online access. Not even 5 years, typically 5 years, meaning that they can revoke it, which sucks. So when they talk about permanent downloads for a supported device, it's permanent, but that's only as long as the device is supported. Once the device is no longer supported, this is not like a PDF file you have access to forever. This is like a PDF file that just comes and goes, like on Taharaj's website. Oh, burn! That is such fucking dad humor right there. Get it? It's again his website. Yeah. If I don't hate you all, you'll be able to tell because I'll edit that garbage dad. Fuck, that was a stupid joke. Anyway, the point of the matter is that I thought that this was a very clear violation of the spirit of that law, if not the letter of the law. You're still advertising it as a lifetime license, and you are not saying over here, lifetime means typically 5 years and blah, blah, blah. You have this shit over here where I see this is a digital license, which is duh. I click details, and then I get to this. I asked a bunch of people to email their consumer protection agencies and CC me on the communications. I checked up on everybody, and as I talked about in this video, nobody heard back anything. One person actually did start getting subscribed to some nonsensical newsletter email, but nobody else got anything. Which means that this law, as it is written, unfortunately, as much as I like the law and the idea of enshrining ownership of the law, it's functionally useless. It doesn't work because companies can still act with impunity and get away with it. There's an interesting report that came out from US PERG that I wanted to go over with you, and this goes over the right to repair law that passed in the state of California. This comes from KQED News, funded by PBS, or I guess it used to be funded by PBS. Rest in peace. Sadly, Public Interest Research Group's July report looked at how well companies are complying with California's right to repair law, which went into effect a year ago this month. The law requires manufacturers of appliances and electronics to make the parts, tools, and information necessary to repair their products available to consumers. Our main takeaway is that manufacturers need to do a better job of complying with California's right to repair law, said Jen Trump, the state director of CalPERG, the state's branch of US PERG. The organization graded 25 products in 5 categories, including cell phones, dishwashers, tablets, gaming consoles, and laptops, and assigned them letter grades based on how well they made repair documentation of parts available to consumers. In general, manufacturers of electronics like Apple, which has a robust self-repair page, receive higher grades than appliance makers. All 5 laptops surveyed got an A or a B. You have a word about that. But outside of that, no dishwasher got above a C, meaning repair help was limited, at best, according to the report. An F grade indicates that no parts repair manuals are available. KQED reached out to several of the companies mentioned in the report and only heard back from LG, the South Korean multinational electronics company, which got an F for one of its dishwashers. The CalPERG grade is baffling, said John I. Taylor, Senior Vice President of LG Electronics USA, in an emailed statement. The report is incorrect. The service manuals and parts for their LG dishwasher are available to consumers in California. A search of LG's website produced only an owner's manual, not a repair manual for the dishwasher surveyed in the report. This does not comply with California's right to repair law, according to Engstrom. When KQED asked an LG customer service representative to provide a repair manual via online chat, the technician responded, "Please be informed that only authorized share it with the customer." Furnished with the full text of California's right to repair law, thing where there's complying with the law, there's complying with the law, and then there's not complying with the law. And the difference between these two seems to be something that John I. Taylor is not aware of while he's so backward. Personally, I think if we talk about something like this, it should be easier for me to get the schematic for the appliance I purchased under this law than it is to find a schematic for a MacBook that is obtained. I'm going to try and find a schematic or a service manual for this LG dishwasher. And then I'm going to try and figure out if it's easier or harder to find a schematic for a MacBook that Apple goes out of their way to not make available. So the model of this is going to be an LG SDWB24W3. And I'm going to compare that to a 2011 Mac. Go to google.com. Okay, service manual, support manuals, warranty, and more. I find an owner's manual. I'm just going to open a bunch of different tabs. Okay, so first tab, manuals, software, owner's manual, online manual, no service bill. Let's see, does the owner's manual or the online manual have anything that would be? This is not a service manual. That's maintenance, cleaning, care, interior. This is not a service manual. Repair request, owner's manual, online manual. This is not a service manual. Owner's manual, not a service manual. 403 forbidden. Now I'm going to try to find a schematic to an 820-2936 MacBook motherboard. I'm just going to open a bunch of pages. I know my form is not going to have a schematic. Better not. But I feel like going El Salvador just yet. Okay, see, this is a RAR file. Let's see if I find an easier one. Click here to download, and boom. It is literally easier for me to find a schematic to something that Apple goes out of their way to make sure I can't get than it is to find a schematic to an LG dishwasher that their own fucking PR people are claiming is publicly available. Are you still fucking baffled? Do you get the idea? Personally, I'd be baffled if LG did follow the law. They haven't been following right to repair laws, but they also haven't been following the Magnus Moss Warranty Act, which has been in place since the 70s. It's been around long enough that they should be in compliance. The warranty for an LG Plasma was similarly unclear, stating that it does not apply to repair or replacement of warranty parts by anyone other than LGE authorized service centers. After reaching out to companies 3 times, we found that most of the customer service representatives we reached out to were fairly clear that independent repair would void the warranty, even if the warranty itself did not explicitly declare this. This deals with those warranty void if removed stickers that you see on many different products. And many people actually believe that these stickers are enforceable, but they're not enforceable. They are against the law. You can't have that there. That's not the way this works. The Magnus Moss Warranty Act does allow a manufacturer to void your warranty, but they have to demonstrate and prove that you did something to break the device. They can't just have some catch-all like a sticker. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have a MacBook and the battery dies on your Mac. You replace the battery in your MacBook on your own. 2 months later, the GPU dies on your MacBook because it's a MacBook, and that's what they used to do back in the day. The GPU would die, usually right on schedule. The GPU dies, and they open your computer and they say, it looks like you replaced your battery, therefore your warranty is fully void. You're not allowed to do that. They can't do that. Now, if they say, well, look, you put the wrong screw in the wrong hole and you drilled a hole through the board, therefore we are not covering this under warranty because you broke it while fixing it. That's allowed under the law. You cannot simply void the warranty just based on the idea that somebody else worked on the product. That's not allowed. Other appliance manufacturers have not been in compliance with this law for a very long period of time, and they're not getting penalized for it either. Again, it comes down to this basic fact that a law is only as useful as a societal will to enforce that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave a link down below for you to file a consumer complaint if you live in the state of California. I would like to see them enforce the laws. And at the very least, if they don't want to enforce the law, can we at least inform them on why the vice president of LG should not be baffled? It is literally easier for me to obtain material that I'm not supposed to have access to than it is for me to obtain a service manual to a fucking dishwasher that the law says I should have access to. I need you guys to help. Consumer protection laws and laws that enshrine the rights of ownership are only as useful as society's willingness to enforce them. Sometimes they just need to look. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. See you all in the next video. Bye.
We also have the duty not to infringe the IP rights in the process. It isn't.
This is where it becomes really important to track consistency and effort. When someone is inconsistent in their behavior, meaning they're nice to you, and then they get less nice, and then maybe even over time they get straight up mean or abusive, right? Or even worse, they were nice to you all the time at the beginning, and now you're in a place where they're nice on Monday, mean on Tuesday, nice on Tuesday morning, mean on Monday night, nice when you're in public, mean when you're in private. That's massive inconsistency. Huge. That should be a red flag. And here's what's so hard, Lisa. I think to most people that is a red flag. I think most people sit there and they know that something is not right. They may not assume that the person is narcissist. They may not assume that the person is abusive. They may give that person every benefit of the doubt. But they know something isn't right. Oftentimes, this is why women blame themselves. Why they say, I must be doing something wrong. I must be making them upset. If I just change this, or if I just do this, or if I just don't talk about this, or if I just don't talk to that person, right, I'll make everything better. Or they'll explain away that their partner or the other person in a relationship is going through something. Oh, it's just a hard time at work. Oh, it's just a stressful period with their parents, or whatever. They're just not dealing well with the recent news. Who knows what? They'll explain away what they already know are signs of inconsistency. A trained person, and anybody hearing this conversation, needs to understand that when you see the inconsistency, you've got to call it what it is. It's inconsistent behavior, not your problem. A change in the behavior pattern of the person that you're with. If that's coming from you, that's one thing. But don't leap to the conclusion that their inconsistency is because of you. Focus on the fact that it's an inconsistency first. Because then, when you look at the effort next, that effort is going to give everything. Does more effort go into them being nice? Does more effort go into them being mean? Does more effort go into them trying to ignore you? Right? Where does their effort go? There's a great saying at CIA that we all care about things where we put our time, money, and energy, our efforts. So if you see somebody putting a lot of effort into being nice, chances are that's what they're trying to be. Stressed out if you see them really trying hard to be nice. But if all their effort goes into ignoring you and being mean, that's what they care about, right? The being nice thing is just convenient and easy in the moment.
So if you were with somebody, let's say I gave you 2 hours with them, and you started to notice that, let's say, their body language and their verbal communication weren't in line, how would you start to decipher whether they're just awkward, or they've got anxiety, or they're trying to lie to you and they're just bad at covering it up?
There's multiple layers to this, because in some ways, 2 hours takes away my benefit of time. Remember, I need time, consistency, and effort.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I did it.
So if you take away my time, then the only two things I have now are consistency and effort. So what that means is I need to step out of the role of being passive and into the role of being aggressive or assertive. Instead of letting them talk, I need to ask questions. I need to direct questions. I need to probe, control the situation. Oftentimes, one of the fastest ways to crack a con is to take control when they're used to having control, right? So let's just take a real quick example. Con man is trying to lure an older woman into trusting him with her money, right? More than likely, that con man is going to show his confidence by controlling the scenario. We're going to go to this restaurant. You're going to love it. I can't wait to show you this wine, and you're going to love the escargot. That's not him being nice. That's him creating a box where he can control the experience inside that box. If that woman wants to test to see if that's genuine or if that's con man behavior, All she has to do is be like, I'm not really feeling like that tonight. What I'm feeling like is tacos. How does he respond to that? If what you see is him be like, no, I really put this together for you. Like, I really want you to experience this. It's important to me. That's a man panicking. When a guy's like, tacos, that's interesting. Like, really? I'm open to tacos, but I don't know any good taco joints. That's him giving you control. Con men do not give up their control. Trained fabricators and manipulators will fight to keep control. It's natural to them because they don't know how to handle themselves outside of control, right? They have to give up control, and that makes them uncomfortable. Where somebody who's genuinely interested in you will let you take control, because what's their number one priority? Giving you an experience that builds your confidence and trust in them. Genuine, not in a fabricated fashion.
Question, but I really do mean it genuinely. People who have OCD are control freaks. So what's the difference between someone that's just got OCD and gets nervous about change, or someone that's trying to control you?
That's where you have to trust body language and verbal cues. When you're talking to somebody with OCD and you try to take them outside of what they're comfortable in, you physically see their physiology change. You can see them start to shake. You can see them get really uncomfortable. You can almost see a fear response because this is too far outside of what they're comfortable with. That's OCD behavior. You might also see them make a shift where they want every detail about where they're going, right? Because if they're going to go to a taco joint, they want to know what's the name, what are the reviews, when was the last time somebody got food poisoning, let me ask a friend, like, who do you know that's been there? Those are OCD behaviors. When you see somebody who doubles down on keeping things their way, that is the sign of a dangerous control freak. That's not somebody who's OCD. OCD is still, they are malleable, right? But with a lot of effort. Whereas a person who just fully resists, that is a sign of somebody who's trying to maintain control. When it comes to relationships especially, if you run into somebody who's fighting for control, you don't want that person. How polite they seem, doesn't matter how much other people like them, that is not what you want for the rest of your life. If they can't let you take control of tonight's movie, if they can't let you take control of the restaurant, they can't let you take control of what day you get together, if they can't let you take control of when you have sex, if they can't let you take control of those things, especially, I'm not saying do it every time. I'm saying just periodically test the relationship to see if control is really something that's shared, right? If they're not willing to do that now, do you really want to have kids? You really want to marry bank accounts? You really want to have life insurance policies? Like, it's a huge sign that you can't trust the person. If they are too immature to share control, you still don't want them. Let them go gain some maturity, or keep your distance, right? Keep yourself safe. But you got to look for the red flags and understand that they are red flags when you see them.
That was so well said. Okay, I've got another interesting question for you. So if I was to hook you up to a polygraph machine, I want you to pretend that you have cheated on your wife. And then I've got you hooked up to a polygraph and I ask you questions. How would you pass the polygraph?
The polygraph is one of the least understood tools by the American public. I don't know if you knew this. Polygraph is not accessible. It's not acceptable evidence in a court case. Polygraphs don't actually tell you if someone's being truthful or dishonest. They're called a lie detector test, but they don't actually detect lies. What they detect is something called sensitivity. So the idea is that will be able to interpret the data from a polygraph and make a conclusion about whether or not you are sensitive to a certain topic. Meaning you're sensitive to a topic about drugs, you're sensitive to a topic about murder, you're sensitive to a topic about abuse. And sensitivity is supposed to be what a trained interrogator can dig into, right? That's why polygraphs are not admissible in court, because they're not actually detecting truthfulness, they're detecting sensitivity. So when you think about that, you realize that passing and failing don't really exist. You can't pass or fail a lie detector. All you're doing in the polygraph is you're creating a baseline of what you are and are not sensitive to. So using that understanding, anybody who wants to beat a polygraph essentially can. You beat the polygraph by making the polygraph results null and void. Essentially what that means is you show sensitivity to everything.
I thought you were going to go the opposite. Don't show sensitivity to anything.
It's very, so when we talk about lying, tell when someone's lying because they put a lot of effort into something. The amount of effort that goes into acting calm is much less effort than the effort that goes into actually being nervous. So when somebody is on a lie detector trying to act calm, there will be a physiological tell that gives them away. I don't know if have you ever done a polygraph?
No, I'm fascinated.
We should get you
Oh my
organized.
God, I would love to.
They're so uncomfortable. So just some of the elements. They measure your heart rate. They measure your body temperature. They measure your sphincter control. They measure your muscle movements. And then they also measure like your eyebrows, your facial movements. So all of those, to control all of those things simultaneously takes so much effort that your heart rate would increase and your body temperature would increase, right? Whereas if you sat down in a polygraph and all you did was just think about all the most uncomfortable things in the world, think about ants crawling up your shorts, think about cold weather, think about whatever else, and all of those different body parts are going to start to react in inconsistent ways, right? You're going to move in your seat because you don't want to, like, you can feel the ants crawling on you. That's going to throw off your sphincter control. You're going to feel your muscles tensing. Sometimes it's your calf, sometimes it's your shoulder, sometimes it's your forearms. That's going to throw off the muscle tension. Heart rate's going to increase, decrease, increase again, decrease again. Blood pressure is going to increase, decreasing. That's going to make the polygrapher look at the polygraph results and say, I can't interpret any sensitivity. It's totally independent of the questions. I ask about drugs, they're weird. I ask about abuse, they're weird. I ask about what's your real name, what's your real birthday, and the physiology is different. So what the bad part of a polygrapher, or the bad part of a polygraph, is anybody can beat it by simply making the results known. And that's what polygraphers have to deal with. And that's why FBI, CIA, DEA, we all hate the polygraph, because it's an impossible tool. When they use it against you, you're like, dude, I had bad Indian food last night. I swear I'm not a
I'm sweating. That's why my heart's racing.
But the polygrapher's like, no, we caught you in that. I'm like, no, you didn't catch me in shit. And you're gonna catch me in shit if you keep me here much longer.
Okay, so we said something there looking at the facial expression. So explain to me a few things, because I mean, look, I think there's so much myth out there as well about, and I've heard you say, if you look up to the left, it means you're lying. If you look up to the right, it means you're telling the truth. Like, there's just a lot of myths out there. But what are like some of the universal, like, okay, if these actually are true, it's not in and of itself an example of, yes, they are lying, but yeah, I'm really trying to think about that woman that's listening right now. And when you trust someone and you give over that trust and then they lie to you, you do blame yourself. And then sometimes you never trust again. So I understand it's never black and white, but what are some of the things that we can maybe look out for? Especially, oh God, I hate infidelity, but that's the biggest one that really wrecks so many of us women, where we trust our partner, we believe them, we believe some crazy idea. When we're out of, I can't believe I believe that.
Right.
But when you, as a woman, you do tie your emotion to that person. So are there any things that we can just in general look at that can be signs that they're not telling you the truth?
So yes, there are. And here's what I would say. I want to use kind of a very simple 3-part solution that works 90% of the time, okay? But not 100% of the time, because cultures are different. People are different, right? If you're dating somebody who's on the spectrum, they will be totally different than somebody who's highly emotional. If you're dating a creative person, but you're an accountant, you're going to react completely different to things, right? So that's why there's 3 steps. There's 3 steps because you can never trust any one piece of data. The goal is always get yourself to a position where you have more options and can collect more information. If there's a rule of thumb I would have for every woman out there, put yourself in a position where you have more options and collect more information. As long as you have more options and more information, you will always have what we call information superiority over the situation, right? So whatever choice you make, more options, more information. So you're with somebody. You want to know if they're lying. You suspect infidelity. The first kind of question I want to teach people to ask is a time-based question. The human brain, it works in a very rational, very logical way whenever time is presented, because time is one of those things that is universal. It doesn't matter whether or not you're of a tribe that's undiscovered in Africa or whether you're part of Western high society. Everybody knows time is a one-way direction. And most of us physically visualize time as a chronology that goes in the same direction as we read. So you see time going from left to right. And you see time going from top to bottom. Right to left. So you got all these people who are going to see through the lens of a chronology that is the direction that they read. And you can watch somebody read a book. You can literally see something. You can do the same thing when you ask someone time-based questions.
No, that's
so I'll just give you one example. Lisa, when was the last time you had a stop right there. Everybody who's watching just saw all I need to see. Your eyes move to the left.
Thank you.
Your eyes move to the left because you're referencing the chronology from today. When was the last time you had a mistake? So if you're asking somebody a time-based question, if you see their eyes move to the left, up, down is different. But if you see their eyes move to the left, you know they're referencing their chronology in their brain because that's how they read for Western society. So whatever you were about to say, you were genuinely trying to find the right time. If I would say, what was this last time I had a mistake and I was going to stay still or make it bigger, now I know the fighting instinct. Fighting instinct takes effort. Effort is one of the three things that you look for when you know someone's lying. It's what we suspect. Right? So the first kind of question is a time-based question. You think someone's having an affair? What? Ask me.
So if they just say right in your arm, that can be a sign.
It can be a sign. Or if they look to the right, look to the right, looking right. Right? So where was that accident? What was obviously looking at the time. Right? Trying to find a story. I'm not trying to reference technology. Right? Even worse, you see someone trying to reference technology. Anybody who's still listening to this conversation, watch a few seconds and watch how fast it happens that fast. Which is why I don't tell people that stop shooting. The second kind of question to ask is a feeling question. Ask somebody feeling questions. You see all sorts of micro expressions in the face because they react to feelings. Right? So I was telling you a story. Just neutralize your face. Once you can close your eyes. Right? What was it like the first time? That's it. That's everything you need, right? Whatever you're going to say, it's going to be true. That's all we need. That's all, because everybody watching just saw your eyes move to the left. As soon as your eyes move to the left, land on a memory. As soon as you land on a memory, all your smile must start.
Thank you. I'm doing this. Tu prove a point, you fucking retarded.
Updates coming to the Linux kernel version 6.17. Many amazing updates, including the storage, networking, overall system calls and improvements are being made, and this is shaping up to be quite the merge window. So let's get right into it. As the first round of updates we're going through has to do with storage updates. These storage updates submitted by Christian here to Linus, part of the virtual file system file attribute for Linux kernel 6.17, which are going to work on things like replacing some system calls. As you can see here, file get attribute and file set attribute, file system IOC fget x attribute, and fs IOC fs set x attribute. These new system calls are going to provide a cleaner, more extensible way to manage file inode attributions from user space and fix a long-standing limitation where special files, things like FIFO sockets and block devices, could not inherit or change attributes like project quotas used in XFS. So this is going to actually improve project quotas in XFS, which could be attached to a directory. All new inodes in these directories inherit project ID now set on inherit directory. With these new system calls, programs running user space outside of the kernel can now manage metadata about files stored in these inodes, which is a more modern and flexible approach. This all matters as it's a way to modernize the virtual file system, which is an abstraction layer that provides an interface which accesses all types of file systems, including for butterfs, XFS, BAT, so on and so forth, no matter how they're implemented underneath the hood. This matters because the old way of setting these inode attributes was inflexible, confusing, and not able to be used by all file types. Great additions in order to standardize and simplify the virtual file system to be used on the kernel. Moving on to the next merge patch, we have Eric here submitting new code to Storvolt, which would update the kernel's cyclic redundancy check code. It's going to do a few things, including code reorganization, which is going to be used for checksums and error detection. It's now being consolidated under the libcrc instead of scattered across Arch or architecture libraries. This means a greater code base and improved performance by inlining code and reducing unused code. This also is going to create a performance boost, specifically on x86-64 CPUs that support a very specific flag, which is this VPC LMU LQ DQ code. Again, a improved performance on these newer CPUs. This flag specifically here is an instruction set that handles vectorized polynomial multiplication, and this will improve things significantly for large data blocks that use the flag. We also get a simplified crypto API with this patch, which will make the crypto subsystem leaner and more consistent here. We're using crypto stash wrappers. We've also done some cleanup, including removing unused hardware from the CRC drivers. For those of you who don't necessarily understand what CRC is, CRC stands for Cyclic Redundancy Check. It's a mathematical algorithm used to detect errors in data transmission and storage. So you can imagine this is pretty cool because we're going to get faster checksumming out of this, which will give better performance for file systems like buttercup, networking, and crypto operations. It's very cool to see all of this being proposed to be merged into the Linux 6.17 release. Here are the performance results. So for those of you who can't quite get your head around what kind of changes it makes, well, we do have some performance results right here. These are results shown as a benchmark comparison of CRC performance before and after enabling the new implementation patch, a highly optimized version using the AVX-512 plus that flag that we talked about. You can see vector polynomial multiplication on x6. The function tested CRC computation speed in megabytes. second. And you can simply see the before and the after, quite a significant speed up on modern CPUs with large data chunks. As we can see here, we're using 4,096 data chunks with over a 3.2 times improvement on some of these units. Here, went from, let's just call it 25 megabytes per second to over 78 megabytes per second. That's an incredible performance boost. Now, the performance results are a little lesser the smaller the chunks get, but are still significant. For example, on the Intel Emerald Rapids, we went from 19 to 29 megabytes per second. Anyways, with that all being said, the ZMM registers are warm, so they don't quite tell the whole story. While significantly improved older Intel CPUs, Intel still does have around 2,000 nanoseconds of ZMM warm-up time, where instructions execute about 4 times more slowly than they do when normally operating. With that caveat, significant improvements as we'll have better data integrity checks with lower CPU costs and better performance on workloads. Fantastic. Let's move on to the next improvement here for 6.17. As this time we get a significant networking improvement, all with a simple patch. This patch for Linux kernel 6.17 swaps the synchronized RCU with the faster synchronized RCU expedited in the lock dependency under register key function. What does that mean? Well, first off, the sync RCU function is the standard read, copy, update synchronization method. Wait until all readers are done before bringing data. Now, this is slow because it has to wait for the CPU to go through its scheduling phase or state, but a faster alternative now is being used, forcing CPUs to respond quickly by using interprocessor interrupts, which is much faster and less disruptive. And we get that with sync underscore RCU expedited EXP. I'm shortening these up, of course, I don't have to write a bunch, but you get the idea here. So why the change? Well, this one line change makes a slow kernel safety check run 10 times faster during network updates by using faster synchronization methods, which will improve the responsiveness. Should reduce user visible network traces during big updates or changes in important cloud and data server debugging workflows. And we can think of this as indirectly speeding things up, as it doesn't necessarily speed up in actual data transmission, but it does reduce the downtime when changing network configuration, meaning live network configurations are a lot faster, downtime for service or traffic during updates is reduced, and better performance with automation tools and containerized platforms. It will make the packets move faster, but it will definitely make the networking infrastructure more responsive and less disruptive when using Linux, which is critical in modern environments. A great networking patch, all made by switching out a simple function for Linux kernel 6.17. And we do get a little bit of an example here. For example, a simple TC command to replace a Q disk could take 13 seconds time. Right here, to replace Ethernet 0 root handle OX1 MQ real took 13.195 user 0.001 system 2.7. After the improved expedited function used, now we get real 1.7 user 0 system 1.6, a 10x improvement on network connectivity changes. Fascinating. Let's move on to the next one. But before we do, take a moment and subscribe. You wouldn't want to miss learning about the Linux kernel in future videos. YouTube can get finicky, and also smash that like button on the way back up so other people hear about these updates, as we got a cool new update and patch on Linux 6.17 to improve handling of lost disks in multi-device systems. This is big, as it's always important before losing one device in a RAID setup. For example, unplugging a disk from a buttercup array would potentially trigger a full file system shutdown, even if data was still recoverable from redundancy, meaning there could be potential data loss. Well, now gracefully handle single disk loss, reducing downtime and preserving system availability. So this is only for multi-device file systems, but a new hook was added in that allows file systems to intercept device removal events and decide if they should continue running code, which is pretty cool. As this new super operations remove bdev callback will try to remove bdev callback first inside of its file system bdev marked dead. If the callback returns 0, meaning the file system can handle the device loss, then exit without doing anything else. If there is no such callback, the callback return non-zero value, continue to shut down the file system as usual. This means the new remove bdev should only do the check on whether the operation continue, and if so, the file system specific handlings
the shutdown handling should still be handled by the existing shutdown callback. And the first file system to implement these is going to be butterfs, which will add both callbacks soon. Basically, this is a major win for reliability and fault tolerance in Linux file systems, especially for RAID-capable file systems like butterfs or cachefs. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, when am I going to get all these updates for the 6.17 kernel release? Well, we should hopefully be seeing some sort of release candidate 1 release during August with a feature freeze testing happening in September and hopefully a October 12th, 2025 expected final release. It's going to take time for a lot of distributions to actually put in the Linux 6.17 kernel unless you upgrade on your own for your system. But nonetheless, a lot of exciting changes. Interesting fix here of a 30-year-old limitation to ELF, as this simple fix here addresses an issue of an outdated and unexplained kernel check that limited the number of program headers in ELF binaries, and it dates back to 1993 when Linux kernel version 0.99. What's the issue here? Well, a script-generated ELF binary with 78 program headers failed to run on an ARM64 with 4K page size, showing an error while it ended up working fine on systems using 64K page sizing, and that simply allowed for more headers due to a relaxed alignment. And notice this alignment right here, size has to be greater than the ELF minimum alignment. The kernel had an arbitrary restriction here, which was ELF min align divided by page size, which rejected binaries with too many headers, even though ELF spec does not impose these limits. Quite wild as we fix a long-standing compatibility issue that's only surfaced on edge cases. Again, this was in the kernel since 1993, over 30 years at this point, and really since the beginning. We're seeing this introduced immersion to the 6.17 kernel as well. And if you want to level up your Linux experience today, check out my checklist, cheat sheet, mind map, and new flashcards, all at savvynick.com. And there's even more to cover, this time with Silicon on Linux, specifically Apple M1 and M2 Macs. With this kernel release, we'll introduce support for rebooting Apple Silicon M1 and M2 Macs via the new Apple SMC System Management Controller driver, something that was only previously available on Asahi Linux. This new System Management Controller is being merged into the mainline kernel. So those of you who are using Apple Silicon with Linux and outside of Asahi Linux, you can now properly shut down and reboot your systems without relying on downstream patches. This brings full upstream support for rebooting the Apple Silicon basic system function that was missing until now in the Linux kernel, and is going to give better support for people using Apple laptops. Significant step aligning core functionality with user expectations, of course. And we see these DT bindings for power on reboot. On Apple Silicon machines, a clean shutdown or reboot requires talking to SMC and writing to NV mem cells. Add a binding for this MFD subsystem. So we can see, since we got the driver, we can now use the driver to actually communicate and properly do a clean shutdown or reboot process. Fantastic. So many weird and quirky things that you wouldn't think of that are required by hardware systems, which you wouldn't quite expect. It's pretty wild that you have to write through the SMC and these NVMe cells just to be able to shut down things on a Silicon Mac. Either way, we're making strides across the board, whether it's an Intel, AMD, Silicon system, the kernel has your back. Now, another patch that is adding efficient zeroing support for SSDs. This patch here from Christian, sent out to Linus, introduces a new phallic FL, write zeros flag to the phallicate system call, allowing file systems like ext4 to efficiently zero out data that's out of data ranges on modern SSDs and SI drives without physically actually writing those zeros. So modern SSDs like NVMe's and SCSIs support fast zeroing via unmapped deallocate commands. This update will add kernel plumbing and flags for these specific types of SSDs. It will also extend phallicate with a new flag, which we already mentioned here. And it's important because it reduces write amplification and I/O overhead when clearing or initializing files. This means faster and more SSD-friendly zero-style writing instead of having to use the old dev0 method, which is a file that has zeros that would then write to the storage disk, and it will help promote file system performance, especially when you have sync write heavy applications, aka database or journal This new patch is going to let the operating system quickly zero out parts of a file on SSDs without actually writing all the zeros out. The old way used to write zeros, again, using DD and the DES. The new way, if an SSD supports it, the kernel can now mark the space as zeroed instantly, leading to way better performance in applications that need a proper write storage. Very cool stuff. As we have even more improvements, this time with EROFS. EROFS stands for the Enhanced Read-Only File System. It's a Linux file system designed for high-performance compressed read-only use cases, especially on mobile, embedded, and container systems. Where it's used, things like Android, containers, where we have immutable root file systems, and embedded systems, again, where we have firmware images that are only used in the read-only state. It gives Linux a fast, efficient, and modern read-only file system, enabling smaller images and faster cold starts. So this patch here will improve support for metadata compression. This makes the read-only file systems even smaller, but slightly slower, although saving more space. Directory reads now also have become 2.5 times faster thanks to the new read-ahead support when listing large directories, aka ones with over 12,000 files. This means we're going to see a save in storage space and improved read performance when using ROFS, making it more practical for real-world systems that rely on very fast, compressed read-only images. Very cool to see yet another performance increase with some simple patching. That's what's so cool about the Linux kernel. Anyone can contribute to it, anyone can make improvements, and we see them nonstop. And it's not all just performance boost. As we get quite a major update to the expands support finally to the Wi-Fi 7 or the Broadcom 800G Ethernet stack, the Intel virtual machine networking, and Realtek USB Wi-Fi devices with new power-efficient features. So the breakdown here is that Wi-Fi 7 EHT support continues, especially on Qualcomm ATH12K, Intel, and MediaTek drivers, but new Realtek USB Wi-Fi support for things like the L8851 and 52BU are being introduced. Improvements to multi-link operation, beacon handling, and regulatory support for 6 gigahertz. As we get notable progress in the Wi-Fi 7 space, we're seeing general improvements, including multi-link operation, continued additions for that EHT or extremely high throughput support, and support for new SDIO-based Broadcom Wi-Fi devices, which are really the early Wi-Fi 7 integration path. Pretty cool, as it doesn't necessarily complete the Wi-Fi 7 support, but it also is building out on a lot of features that are going to make for Wi-Fi 7 support. It's a massive patch, and this is planned again to be merged into Linux kernel 6.17. And now finally on to a controversial patch submission. As Kent Overstreet keeps working on Bcachefs, we had a falling out between Linus and Kent, the lead maintainer of Bcachefs, which left Linus finally saying, I have pulled this, but also per that discussion, I think we'll be parting ways in the 6.17 merge window. You've made it very clear that I can't even question any bug fixes and I should just pull anything and everything. Honestly, at that point, I really don't feel comfortable being involved at all. And the only thing we both seemed to really fundamentally agree on in the discussion was we're done. Signed off Linus. And that left a lot of people thinking, what exactly is going to happen to Bcachefs? As this was very ominous, we're done. And we haven't heard anything from Linus on the clarification what this actually means. Are we going to be removing Bcachefs completely from the Linux kernel? Are we going to pull it back out of experimental in the Linux kernel? What's happening? And we still haven't got an answer. But Kent is pushing forwards as he's actually making some Bcachefs changes for the Linux kernel 6.17 and also making a bold prediction. Schedule notes for users. I've been digging through the bug tracker and pulling users to see what bugs are still outstanding, and it's not much. So the experimental label is coming off in 6.18. As always, if you hit a bug, please report it. This was actually sent to Linus, so we're going to be hopefully seeing a response soon. We have not quite yet seen that response, but this might actually force Linus to make a response. And you wouldn't want to miss that, so make sure to subscribe below and smash that like button on your way back.
It's hard for us humans to make any kind of clean predictions about a highly nonlinear dynamical system. Be very
surprised what classical learning systems might be able to do about even fluid.
Yes, exactly. I mean, fluid dynamics, Navier-Stokes equations, these are traditionally thought of as very, very difficult, intractable problems to do on classical systems. They take enormous amounts of compute, weather prediction systems, these kind of things all involve fluid dynamics calculations. But again, if you look at something like VO, our video generation model, it can model liquids quite well, surprisingly well, and materials, specular lighting. I love the ones where there's people who generate videos where there's like clear liquids going through hydraulic press. Now, I used to write physics engines and graphics engines in my early days in gaming, and I know it's just so painstakingly hard to build programs that can do that, and yet somehow these systems are reverse engineering from just watching YouTube videos. So presumably what's happening is it's extracting some underlying structure around how these materials behave. So perhaps there is some kind of lower dimensional manifold that can be learned if we actually fully understood what's going on under the hood. That's maybe true of most of reality.
The following is a conversation with Demis Hassabis, his second time on the podcast. He is the leader of Google DeepMind and is now a Nobel Prize winner. Demis is one of the most brilliant and fascinating minds working on understanding and building intelligence and exploring the big mysteries of our universe. This was truly an honor and a pleasure for me. This is the Lex Friedman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description and consider subscribing to this channel. And now, dear friends, here's Demis Hassabis. In your Nobel Prize lecture, you propose what I think is a super interesting conjecture that, quote, any pattern that can be generated or found in nature can be efficiently discovered and modeled by a classical learning algorithm. What kind of patterns and systems might be included in that? Biology, chemistry, physics, maybe cosmology, neuroscience? What are we talking about?
Sure. Well, look, I felt that it's sort of a tradition, I think, of Nobel Prize lectures that you're supposed to be a little bit provocative, and I wanted to follow that tradition. What I was talking about there is if you take a step back and you look at all the work that we've done, especially with the AlphaX projects, so I'm thinking AlphaGo, of course, AlphaFold. What they really are is we're building models of very combinatorially high dimensional spaces that, if you try to brute force a solution, find the best move and go, or find the exact shape of a protein, and if you enumerated all the possibilities, there wouldn't be enough time in the time of the universe. So you have to do something much smarter. And what we did in both cases was build models of those environments, and that guided the search in a smart way, and that makes it tractable. So if you think about protein folding, which is obviously a natural system, why should that be possible? How does physics do that? Proteins fold in milliseconds in our bodies. So somehow physics solves this problem that we've now also solved computationally. And I think the reason that's possible is that in nature, natural systems have structure because they were subject to evolutionary processes that shaped them. And if that's true, then you can maybe learn what that structure is.
So this perspective, I think, is a really interesting one. You've hinted at it, which is almost like crudely stated. Anything that can be evolved can be efficiently modeled. I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah, I sometimes call it survival of the stablest or something like that, because it's of course there's evolution for life, living things. But there's also, if you think about geological time, so the shape of mountains, that's been shaped by weather processes, right, over thousands of years. But then you can even take it cosmological, the orbits of planets, the shapes of asteroids. These have all been survived kind of processes that have acted on them many, many times. So if that's true, then there should be some sort of pattern that you can kind of reverse learn, and a kind of manifold really that helps you search to the right solution, to the right shape, and actually allow you to predict things about it in an efficient way, because it's not a random pattern, right? So it may not be possible for things like factorizing large numbers, because unless there's patterns in the number space, which there might be, but if there's not and it's uniform, then there's no pattern to learn. there's no model to learn that will help you search. You have to do brute force. So in that case, you maybe need a quantum computer, something like this. But in most things in nature that we're interested in are not like that. They have structure that evolved for a reason and survived over time. And if that's true, I think that's potentially learnable by a neural network.
It's like nature's doing a search process, and it's so fascinating that it's in that search process is creating systems that could be efficiently modeled.
That's right. Yeah.
So interesting.
So they can be efficiently rediscovered or recovered because nature's not random, right? Everything that we see around us, including like the elements that are more stable, all of those things, they're subject to some kind of selection process, pressure.
Do you think, because you're also a fan of theoretical computer science and complexity, do you think we can come up with a kind of complexity class, like a complexity class where maybe it's the set of learnable systems, set of learnable natural systems, LNS? This is a Demis new class of systems that could be actually learnable by classical systems kind of way, natural systems that could be modeled efficiently.
I mean, I've always been fascinated by what is modelable by classical systems, and that's exactly what I'm working on actually in kind of my few moments of spare time with a few colleagues about should there be, maybe a new problem that is solved by this type of neural network process and kind of mapped onto these natural systems. So, the things that exist in physics and have structure. So I think that could be a very interesting new way of thinking about it. And it sort of fits with the way I think about physics in general, which is that, I think information is primary. Information is the most sort of fundamental unit of the universe, more fundamental than energy and matter. I think they can all be converted into each other, but I think of the universe as a kind of informational system.
So when you think of the universe as an informational system, then the P equals NP question is a physics question.
That's right.
And it's a question that can help us actually solve the entirety of this whole thing going on.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most fundamental questions, actually, if you think of physics as informational. And the answer to that, I think, is going to be, very enlightening.
More specific to the P and P question, this, again, some of the stuff we're saying is kind of crazy right now. Just like the Christian Atkinson Nobel Prize speech controversial thing that he said sounded crazy, and then you went and got a Nobel Prize for this, which I don't solve the problem. So let me just stick to the P equals NP. Do you think there's something in this thing we're talking about that could be shown if you could do something like polynomial time or constant time compute ahead of time and construct this gigantic model, then you can solve some of these extremely difficult problems in a theoretical computer science kind of way?
Yeah, I think that there are actually a huge class of problems that could be couched in this way, the way we did AlphaGo and the way we did AlphaFold, where you model what the dynamics of the system is, the properties of that system, the environment that you're trying to understand, and then that makes the search for the solution or the prediction of the next step efficient, basically polynomial time, so tractable by a classical system, which a neural network is. It runs on normal computers, right? Classical computers, Turing machines in effect. And I think it's one of the most interesting questions there is how far can that paradigm go? I think we've proven in the AI community in general that classical systems, Turing machines, can go a lot further than we previously thought. They can do things like model the structures of proteins and play Go to better than world champion level. And, a lot of people would have thought maybe 10, 20 years ago that was decades away, or maybe you would need some sort of quantum machines to quantum systems to be able to do things like protein folding. And so I think we haven't really even sort of scratched the surface yet of what classical systems, so-called, could do. And of course, AGI being built on a neural network system on top of a neural network system on top of a classical computer would be the ultimate expression of that. And I think the limit, what the bounds of that kind of system, what it can do, is a very interesting question and directly speaks to the P equals NP question.
What do you think, again, hypothetical, might be outside of this? Maybe emergent phenomena, Like if you look at cellular automata, you have extremely simple systems and then some complexity emerges.
Yes.
Maybe that would be outside, or even, would you guess even that might be amenable to efficient modeling by a classical machine?
Yeah, I think those systems would be right on the boundary, right? So I think most emergent systems, cellular automata, things like that, could be modelable by a classical system. You just sort of do a forward simulation of it, and it'd probably be efficient enough. Of course, there's the question of things like chaotic systems, where the initial conditions really matter, and then you get to some, uncorrelated end state. Now, those could be difficult to model. So I think these are kind of the open questions. But I think when you step back and look at what we've done with the systems and the problems that we've solved, and then you look at things like VO3 on like video generation, sort of rendering physics and lighting and things like that, really core fundamental things.
Morning. How are you today?
And he's telling us
Very
something
well,
quite
thank you.
fundamental about in my video. So, in a way, that's what I want to build AGI for, is to help us as scientists answer these questions, like P equals MP.
Yeah, I think we might be continuously surprised about what is modeled by classical computers. I mean, AlphaFold 3 on the interaction side is surprising that you could make any kind of progress in that direction. Alpha Genome is surprising that you can map the genetic code to the function. Kind of playing with the emergent kind of phenomena, you think there's so many combinatorial options that, and then here you go. You can find the kernel that is efficient.
Yes, because there's some structure, there's some landscape, the energy landscape, whatever it is, that you can follow, some gradient you can follow. What neural networks are very good at is following gradients. And so if there's one to follow, an objective, you can specify the objective function correctly. You don't have to deal with all that complexity, which I think is how we maybe have naively thought about it for decades, those problems. If you just enumerate all the possibilities, it looks mostly bad. And there's many, many problems like that. And then you think, well, it's like 10 to the 300 possible protein structures, 10 to the 170 possible go positions. All of these are way more than atoms in the universe. So how could one possibly find the right solution or predict the next step? But it turns out that it is possible. And of course, reality, nature does do it, right? Proteins do form. So that gives you confidence that there must be, if we understood how physics was doing that, in a sense, and we could mimic that process, model that process, it should be possible on our classical systems is basically what the conjecture is about.
And of course, there's nonlinear dynamic systems, highly everything involved in fluid.
Yes, right.
This is a conversation with Aristotle mathematically it contends with a very difficult aspect of systems that have some singularities in them that break the mathematics. And it's just hard for us to make any kind of clean predictions about how the nonlinear dynamic system. But again, to your point, classical learning systems might be able to do well.
Yes, exactly. Good dynamic average state equations. These are traditionally thought of as very, very difficult, intractable kind of problems to do on classical systems. They take enormous amounts of compute. Weather prediction systems. These kind of things all involve fluid dynamics calculations. And but again, if you look at something like VO, our video generation model, it can model liquids quite well, surprisingly well. And lighting, I love the ones where there's people who generate videos where there's like clear liquids going through hydraulic presses and it's being squeezed out. I used to write physics engines and graphics engines in my early days in gaming, and I know that it's just so basically hard to build programs that can do that, and yet somehow these systems are reverse engineering from just watching YouTube videos. So presumably what's happening is it's extracting some underlying structure around how these materials behave. So perhaps there is some kind of lower dimensional manifold that can be learned if we actually fully understood what's going on under the hood. That's maybe true of most of reality.
Yeah, I've been continuously, precisely by this aspect of it. I think a lot of people highlight different aspects.
Yes.
And then the ultra realistic ability to capture humans in a really nice way that's compelling and feels close to reality, and then combine that with native audio. All of those are marvelous things about VO3, but exactly the thing you're mentioning, which is it's not perfect, the really interesting side of the question is, what is it understanding about our world in order to be able to do that? Because if the cynical would take there's no way to understand it. But it seems that I don't think you can generate that kind of video without understanding it. And then on the philosophical notion to understand that is like brought to the surface. Like, to what degree do you think you understand?
I think to the extent that it can predict the next frames, in a coherent way, that is a form, of understanding, right? Not in the anthropomorphic version. It's not some kind of deep philosophical understanding of what's going on. I don't think these systems have that, but they certainly have modeled enough of the dynamics, put it that way, that they can pretty accurately generate whatever it is, 8 seconds of consistent video that by eye, at least, at a glance, it's quite hard to distinguish what the issues are. And imagine that in 2 or 3 more years' time. That's the thing I'm thinking about, and how incredible that they will look, given where we've come from, the early versions of that 1 or 2 years ago. And so the rate of progress is incredible. And I think I'm like you, it's like a lot of people, the stand-up comedians, and that actually captures a lot of human dynamics very well, and body language. But actually, the thing I'm most impressed with and fascinated by is the physics behavior, the lighting and materials and liquids. And it's pretty amazing that it can do that. And I think that shows that it has some notion of at least intuitive physics, right? How things are supposed to work intuitively, maybe the way that a human style, right? As opposed to a PhD student should be being able to unpack the equations. It's more of an intuitive physics.
For that intuitive physics, understand that's the base layer. That's the thing that's called common sense. It really understands something that's going to really surprise a lot of people. My mind. I just didn't think it was possible to generate that level of units without understanding. There's this notion that you can only understand people body, AI system, robot, interact with that world. That's the only way to construct an understanding of that world.
Yeah.
But DO3 is directly challenging that.
Right. Yes. And it's very interesting, even now, if you were to ask me 5, 10 years ago, I would have said, said, we actually need to understand intuitive physics. Like if I push this on the table, this glass maybe shatter, and the liquid will spill out, right? So we know all these things. But I thought that, there's a lot of theories in neuroscience action, where, you need to act in the world to really perceive it in a deep way. And there was a lot of theories about embodied intelligence, robotics, or something, or maybe at least simulated action, so that you would understand things like intuitive physics. It seems like you can understand it through active observation. We need to write it. And again, underlying about the nature of what beyond just the videos that it generates. And of course, this next stages is maybe making that video interactive. So one can actually step into them, which would be really quite low, especially if people like think about it. So you can imagine. And then I think it's starting to get a model of how the world works, the mechanics of the world, the physics of the world, and the things in that world. And of course, that's what you would need for intuitive devices.
I have to talk to you about video games.
Yeah.
So actually, we have to let me play a video game with 5 videos already. Playable world models, and then you can treat that with so how hard is it to build game worlds with AI? Maybe look out into the future. Video games 5 to 10 years out. What do you think that looks like?
Well, games were my first love, really. Doing AI for games was the first thing I did professionally in the teenage years, and it was the first major AI system I built. And I always want to scratch that itch one day and come back to that. So, and I will do, I think. And I think I sort of dream about, what would I have done back in the 90s if I had access to the kind of AI system. I think you could build absolutely mind-blowing games. And I think the next stage is I always used to love making games like games. So they're games where there's a simulation and then there's AI characters and then the player interacts with that simulation and the simulation adapts to the player. And I always thought they were the coolest games because so games like theme park that I worked on where everybody's game experience was unique to them, right? Because you're kind of co-creating the game. Right? We set up the parameters, we set up initial conditions, and then you as the player immersed in it, and then you are co-creating it with the simulation. But of course, it's very hard to program open world games. You know, you've got to be able to create content whichever direction the player goes in, and you want it to be competitive no matter what the player chooses. And so it's quite difficult to do things like say commentary, like those kind of classic systems which create some emergent behavior. But they're always a little bit fragile, a little bit limited. Now they're maybe on the cusp in the next few years, 5, 10 years, of having AI systems that can truly create around imagination, can now sort of dynamically change the story and storytell the narrative around and make it dramatic no matter what you end up choosing. So it's like the ultimate choose your own adventure sort of game. And you know, I think maybe we're within reach if you think of a kind of interactive version of VR. And then you know, imagine how good it's going to be.
Yeah, so a lot of things. So one, the open world built into that organization. It's not just that it's open world. It's that the choice in which story you open in an unconstrained way defines the world you see. So some games tried that, they give you no choice.
Yeah.
There's really just a no choice because you only stand right.
Yeah.
It's really there's a couple of doors. It's down there. It's the other girl. It's like that box. But I do like one of my favorite games. That ball. They give you random generation. Step in, and it gives you this feeling. There, you mentioned interactivity. You need to interact. That's the first step. You don't need to interact that much. You just open the door, whatever you see is randomly generated for you. That's already an incredible experience because you might be the only person ever see it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but what you'd like is a little bit better than sort of random generation, right? So you'd like, and also better than a simple A/B hard-coded choice, right? That's not really open world, right? As you say, it's just giving you one to be able to do is potentially anything in that game environment. And I think the only way you can do that is to have generated systems that generate that on the fly. Of course, you can't create infinite amounts of game assets, right? It's expensive enough already how AAA games are made today. And that was obvious to us back in the 90s when I was working on these games. I think maybe Black and White that I worked on early stages of that had still probably the best AI learning AI in it. It was an early reinforcement learning system that you were looking after this mythical creature and growing it and nurturing it. Depending how you treated it, it would treat the villagers in that world in the same way. So if you've been to it, it would be mean. If you're good, it would be protected. And so it was really a reflection of the way you played it. So actually, all of the I've been working on simulations and AI. It was through the medium of games at the beginning of my career, and really the whole of what I do today is those early hard-coded ways of doing the AI to now, fully general learning systems that are trying to achieve the same thing.
Yeah, it's been interesting, hilarious, fun to watch you and Elon obviously itching to create games, as both gamers. One of the sad aspects of our incredible success is when we make designs, stuff that you might not have time to create a game. Have to watch others create the thing you create. So do you think it's possible you can somehow use this schedule to actually find time to create something like some the actual video game? Like you can pick the childhood dream
Yeah. Well, there's two things when I think about that. Maybe with vibe coding is to get better. There's a possibility that I could, once we do that, actually, so I'm quite excited about that. That was my project. Maybe itching to do that. And then the other thing is, maybe it's sabbatical after AQA. It's safely distributed into the world and delivered into the world. That, and then working on my physics theory, we talk about the beginning of actually API projects.
I'd love to see both API relationships solving the problem that the smartest people in history contended with when P equals P. Or creating the cool.
Yeah. Well, but in my world, they'd be related because it would be an open world simulated game. As realistic as possible. So, what is the universe? That's speaking to the same question, right? P equals MP. I think all these things are related at least in my mind.
It's serious when video games sometimes go down on just this fun side activity. Especially as AI does more and more of difficult, boring tasks. Video games is the thing which we may find meaning, which we may find which meaning experience. But that's what you find in ways of living.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, those of us who love games and still do it is it's almost a mental imagination of one, right? I used to love games and working with games so much because it's the 90s, 2000s, the sort of golden era of the 80s, game industry, and what we discovered, we weren't just making games, we felt basically entertainment media, and everything. And especially with these open world games, simulation games, we get users to play it. There's no other media game you can do that. We're using the interaction. Now with multiplayer games, well, it can be a very social activity and kind of interesting world. But on the other hand, it's very considered strange experience the physical world. But the question is then, I think we're going to have to probably confront the question again of what is the fundamental nature of reality. What is going to be the difference between these increasingly realistic simulations and multiplayer ones and convergent and what we do to them?
Yeah, there's clearly a huge amount of value in experiencing the real world. There's also a huge amount of value in experiencing other humans directly. Yeah. It's really scientific. Yeah. It's a big aspect of that can't be done. Exactly. And I don't say, yeah, hang on nature. Why? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's maybe the thing that's been haunting me or testing me from the beginning of my career. You think about different things I found fascinating related in that way. The simulation, nature of reality, and what is the bounds of, what could be. Sorry for the ridiculous question. So far, what is the greatest thing? Well, my favorite one of all time, I have to say, that was the Civilization 1 and Civilization 2, my favorite games of all time. I can only assume you avoided the most recent one because probably that would be your spot. That would you visit here. Yes, exactly. They take a lot of time, these civilization games. So I'm going to be careful. One question. Somehow solid gamers. Is there a connection between creating gaming and being great leaders? I don't know. It's an interesting one. I mean, we both love games and speaking about games as well to start off with. It's probably, especially in the era I grew up in where computers just became a thing, in the late 80s and 90s, especially in the UK, by the Spectrum and then Amiga 500 was my favorite computer ever. And that's why I learned all my programming. And of course, it's a very fun thing to program games. So I think it's a great way to learn programming from the bits. And then, of course, I immediately took it, which
So I was able to express my interest in games and my sort of wider scientific interest. And the final thing I think that's great about games is artistic design, art with the most cutting edge program. So again, in the 90s, all of the most interesting technical advances were happening in gaming, whether that's AI, graphics, physics engines, hardware, even GPUs, of course, were designed for gaming originally. So everything that was forward in the 90s was due to gaming. So interestingly, that was where the forefront of research was going on, and it was this incredible fusion with art, graphics, but also music, and just the whole new media of storytelling. And I love that. For me, it's this sort of multidisciplinary kind of effort is again something I've enjoyed my whole life.
I have to ask you. I almost forgot. Well, one of the many, I would say, one of the most incredible things recently somehow didn't yet get enough attention is alpha evolve. Talked about evolution a little bit, but it's the Google DeepMind system that evolves algorithms. Are these kinds of evolution-like techniques promising as a component of future superintelligent systems? So if people don't know, it's kind of, I don't know if it's fair to say it's LLM-guided evolution search.
Yeah.
So evolutionary algorithms are doing the search, and LLMs are telling you where.
Yes, exactly. The LLMs are kind of proposing some possible solutions, and then you use evolutionary computing on top to find some novel part of the search space. So actually, I think it's an example of very promising directions where you combine LLMs, foundation models, with other computational techniques. Evolutionary methods is one, but you could also imagine Monte Carlo tree search. Basically, many types of search algorithms or reasoning algorithms sort of on top of or using the foundation model as a basis. So I actually think there's quite a lot of interesting things to be discovered probably with these sort of hybrid systems, let's call it.
But not to romanticize evolution.
Yeah.
Or human. But you think there's some value in whatever that mechanism is? Because we already talked about natural systems. Do you think where there's a lot of low-hanging fruit of us understanding, being able to model, being able to simulate evolution, and then using that, whatever we understand about that nature-inspired mechanism to then do search better and better and better?
Yes. So if you think about, again, breaking down the sort of systems we've built to their really fundamental core, you've got like the model of the underlying dynamics of the system. And then if you want to discover something new, something novel that hasn't been seen before, then you need some kind of search process on top to take you to a novel region of the search space. And you can do that in a number of ways. Evolutionary computing is one. With AlphaGo, we just use Monte Carlo tree search, right? And that's what found Move 37, the new kind of never seen before strategy in Go. And so that's how you can go beyond potentially what is already known. So the model can model everything that you currently know about, right? All the data that you currently have. But then how do you go beyond that? So that starts to speak about the ideas of creativity. How can these systems create something new, discover something new? Obviously, this is super relevant for scientific discovery or pushing science and medicine forward, which we want to do with these systems. And you can actually bolt on some fairly simple search systems on top of these models and get you into a new region of space. Of course, you also have to make sure that you're not searching that space totally randomly. It would be too big. So you have to have some objective function that you're trying to optimize and hill climb towards, and that guides that search.
But there's some mechanism of evolution that are interesting, maybe in the space of programs, but then the space of programs that shouldn't be towards space because you can probably generalize it to everything. Mutation. So it's not just Monte Carlo tree search where it's like a search. You can every once in a while
combine things,
alter like components of a thing.
Yes.
So then, what evolution is really good at is not just the natural selection. It's combining things and building increasingly complex hierarchical systems.
Yes.
So that component is super interesting, especially like with Alpha Evolve and the space of programs.
Yeah, exactly. So you can get a bit of an extra property out of evolutionary systems, which is capability may come about. Of course, like happened with life. Interestingly, with naive sort of traditional evolution computing methods without LLMs and the modern AI, the problem with them, there were varieties and early 2000s and some promising results, but the problem was they could never work out how to evolve new properties, new emergent properties. You always had a sort of subset of the properties that you put into the system, but maybe if we combine them with these foundation models, perhaps we can overcome that limitation. Obviously, natural evolution clearly did, because it did evolve new capabilities, right? So bacteria to where we are now. So clearly that it must be possible with evolutionary systems to generate new patterns, going back to the first thing we talked about, and new capabilities and emergent properties. And maybe we're on the cusp of discovering how to do that.
Yeah, listen, AlphaGo is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I've on my desk at home, most of my time spent in the computer just programming, and next to the three screens is this skull of a tiktaalik, which is one of the early organisms that crawled out of the water onto land. And I just kind of watch that little guy. It's like whatever the competition mechanism of evolution is quite incredible.
Yes,
truly incredible. Yeah. Now, whether that's exactly the thing we need to do to do our search, but never dismiss the power of nature, what it did to you.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's a relatively simple algorithm, right? Effectively, and it can generate all of this immense complexity. Emerges, obviously running over 4 billion years of time, but it's you can think about that as again a search process that ran over the physics substrate of the universe for a long amount of computational time, but then it generated all this incredible rich diversity.
So many questions I want to ask. So one, you do have a dream. One of the natural systems you want to try to model is a cell. That's a beautiful dream. I could ask you about that. I also just, for that purpose, on the AI scientist front, just broadly. So there's a essay from Daniel Kokotayo, Scott Alexander. It's along the way to get to ASI, and has a lot of interesting ideas in it. One of which is including a superhuman coder and a superhuman AI researcher. And in that, there's a term of research taste. Everything you've seen, do you think it's possible for AI systems to have research taste to help you in the way that AI co-scientist does, to help steer human brilliant scientists, and then potentially by itself to figure out what are the directions where you want to generate truly novel ideas? Because that seems to be like a really important component of how to do great science.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the hardest things to mimic or model is this idea of taste or judgment. I think that's what separates the great scientists from the good scientists. Like all professional scientists are good technically, right? Otherwise it wouldn't have made it that far in academia and things like that. But then do you have the taste to sort of sniff out what the right direction is, what the right experiment is, what the right question is? So it's picking the right question is the hardest part of science, and making the right hypothesis. And that's what today's systems definitely they can't do. So I often say it's harder to come up with a conjecture, a really good conjecture, than it is to solve it. So we may have systems soon that can solve pretty hard conjectures. I maths Olympiad problems. We Alpha proved last year. Our system got silver medal in that. Really hard problems. Maybe eventually we'll better solve a Millennium Prize kind of problem. But could a system come up with a conjecture worthy of study? And someone like Terence Tao would have gone, you know what? That's a really deep question about the nature of maths or the nature of numbers or the nature of physics. And that is far harder type of creativity. And we don't really know, today's systems clearly can't do that. And we're not quite sure what that mechanism would be, this kind of leap of imagination, like Einstein had when he came up with special relativity and then general relativity with the knowledge he had at the time.
As for conjecture, you want to come up with a thing that's interesting and amenable to proof.
Yes.
So it's easy to come up with a thing that's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
It's easy to come up with a thing that's extremely easy. But at that very end,
that sweet spot, right, of basically advancing the science and splitting the hypothesis space into two, ideally, right? Whether it's true or not true, you've learned something really useful, and that's hard, and making something that's also falsifiable and within sort of the technologies that you currently have available. So it's a very creative process, actually. Highly creative process that I think just a kind of naive search on top of a model won't be enough for that.
Okay, the idea of splitting the hypothesis space into is super interesting. So I've heard you say that there's basically no failure, or failure is extremely valuable if it's done, if you construct the questions right, if you construct the experiments right, if you design them right, that failure and success are both useful. So perhaps because it splits the hypothesis basic too.
Yes, that's right. So when you do real blue sky research, there's no such thing as failure really, as long as you're picking experiments and hypotheses that meaningfully split the hypothesis space. So, and you learn something, you can learn something kind of equally valuable from an experiment that doesn't work. That should tell you, if you designed the experiment well and your hypotheses are interesting, it should tell you a lot about where to go next. And then you're effectively doing a search process and using that information in very helpful ways.
So to go to your dream of modeling a cell, what are the big challenges that lay ahead for us to make that happen? Or maybe highlight that AlphaFold. There's just so many leaps. So AlphaFold solved, it's fair to say, protein folding. There's so many incredible things we talk about there, including the open sourcing, everything we've released. AlphaFold 3 is doing protein, RNA, DNA interactions, which is super complicated and fascinating. That's amenable to modeling. Alpha Genome predicts how small genetic changes, like single mutations, how they link to actual function. So those are, it seems like it's creeping along.
Yeah.
They're sophisticated, much more complicated things like a cell, but a cell has a lot of really complicated components.
Yeah. So what I've tried to do throughout my career is I have these really grand dreams, and then I try to, as you've noticed, and then I try to break them down. It's easy to have a kind of crazy ambitious dream, but the trick is, how do you break it down into manageable, achievable steps that are meaningful and useful in their own right? And so virtual cells is what I call the project of modeling a cell. I've had this idea, of wanting to do that for maybe more like 25 years. And I used to talk with Paul Nurse, who's a bit of a mentor of mine in biology. He runs the founded the Crick Institute and won the Nobel Prize in 2001. We've been talking about it since, before in the 90s. And I come to this like, what would you need to model the full internals of a cell so that you can on the virtual cell? And those experiments, and those predictions would be useful for you to save your lead dream. Maybe you could 100x speed up experiments by doing a step in the wet lab. That's the dream. And so, but maybe now, finally, so I was trying to build these components, AlphaFold being one, that would allow you eventually to model the full interaction, a full simulation of a cell. And I'd probably start with a yeast cell, and partly that's what Paul Nurse studied, because the yeast cell is like a full organism that's a single cell, right? So it's the kind of simplest single cell organism. And so it's not just a cell, it's a full organism. And yeast is very well understood. And so that would be a good candidate for a simulated model. Now, AlphaFold is the solution to the kind of static picture of what does protein, 3D structure of protein look like, a static picture of it. But we know that biology, all the interesting things happen with the dynamics, the interactions, and that's what AlphaFold is the first step, is modeling those interactions. So first of all, pairwise, protein to protein, protein with RNA and DNA. But then the next step after that would be modeling maybe a whole pathway, maybe like a pathway that's involved in cancer or something like this. And then eventually you might be able to model, a whole cell.
Also, there's another complexity here, that stuff in the cells, is that tricky? Like the protein folding is super fast.
Yeah.
I don't know all the biological mechanisms, but some of them take a long time.
Yeah.
So that's a level. So the levels of interaction has a different temporal scale.
Yeah.
You have to be on.
That would be hard. You'd probably need several simulated systems that can interact with these different temporal dynamics. Or at least maybe it's like a hierarchical system, so you can jump up and down the different temporal stages.
Can you avoid one of the challenges? Avoid simulating. One can glass. One should not skip ahead. Just model really high level things.
Yes. So you've got to make a decision when you're modeling any natural system. What is the cutoff level of the granularity that you're going to model it to that captures the dynamics that you're interested in? So probably for a cell, I would hope that's where AlphaFold stuff fits in. So that would be kind of the basis, and then you build these higher level simulations that take those as building blocks, and then you get the emergent behavior.
Apologize for private questions ahead of time, but do you think be able to simulate being able to simulate first from downloading organisms
I think that's one of the questions. I love that area of biology. People claim one of the top experts in this area, the 10 great inventions of evolution. I think it's fantastic, and it also speaks to what the great filters might be, prior or ahead of us. I think they're most likely in the past, if you read that book, how unlikely to go, have any life at all, and then single cell to multi-cell seems an unbelievably big jump that took like a billion years. I think, to show you how hard it was.
Bacteria were super happy for a
For a
long
very long time before they captured mitochondria somehow. We don't see why AI couldn't help with that. Some kind of simulation again. It's a bit of a search process through combinatorial space. It's like the chemical soup that you start with, the primordial soup. Maybe it was on Earth. Here these events. Here's initial conditions. Can you generate something that looks like a cell? So perhaps that would be the next stage of the cell project.
係啦，佢依家每度咁樣嘛。咁然之後，如果你上翻就28000，咁其實你除翻6已經4000嘅，其實你即係有得可以攞嘅，可唔可以貼翻一個數啊？你貼翻一個咁樣嚟，即係基本上係啊，咁係啊，即係其實真係問下咯，我覺得咁樣。係啊，即係我問下佢係咪可以派力都唔要定或者問佢係啊，如果佢話唔得嘅，可以貼咁少嘅咁咪係咯，二環表你都冇得㗎。
To me, it's always had this sort of screaming at the end, but I think that's it's getting louder. And how what's going on? In the deeper sense, like the nature of reality, which has to be the ultimate question that would answer all of these things. It's sort of crazy if you think about it. We can stare at each other and these living things all the time. We can inspect with microscopes and take it apart almost down to the atomic level, and yet we still can't answer that clearly in a simple way, that question of how you define living. It's kind of amazing.
Libby, I talked out of thinking about consciousness.
嗰啲係 Austin 嚟嘅，係咪啊 ？Ice Wall 琴晚 send 出嚟啊？我諗應該係咧，我瞓咗，然之後咧老細又走去揾阿 Alex，喂，你知唔知有 GB 去澳洲啊？然之後 Alex 又唔知，咪夾硬舉啲嘢出嚟，即係話我哋 check 過啦，而家有啲咩去澳洲咁樣咯。咁佢又可以答噶嘛？咁啊夾硬揾啲佢知道嘅嘢出嚟咯。嗰啲應該係唔知 SP 之類嘅嘢嚟嘅，應該係。但係我哋好似 TP 做咗包機喎，我哋做咗包機去 Melbourne， 應該輪嚟嘅。
I mean, whether
剛才我兩隻包機我哋做
small part.
Well, they're better than traditional dynamics systems that usually calculate on massive supercomputers, takes days to calculate it. We managed to model a lot of the weather patterns with the next system. Again, it's interesting that those kinds of dynamics can, even
very complicated